Hey, deserving listeners, I thought I would do a reaction video to one of my favorite depictions of therapy that is in all the movies I've ever seen and all the TV shows I've ever seen. It's very rare for a depiction of therapy to be something that I consider to be a good representation of therapy. And although there's a couple scenes that, from my memory in this movie, that are very questionable ethics and technique, there are some scenes that I will actually refer to sometimes when I'm teaching my students and supervising my supervisees. Good Will Hunting, the late Robin Williams playing a therapist with Matt Damon as the client.
I've spoken to the judge, and he's agreed to release you. And the second condition is that you see a therapist.
In my early career, I would actually occasionally have court-ordered clients. In my practice today, people voluntarily come to me. They really want to work on things. Working with a court-ordered person usually is a total drag for the therapist.
You want to read a real history book, read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. That book will fucking knock you on your ass.
Better than Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent? Do you think that's a good book?
Fucking people baffle me. Spend all your money on these fucking fancy books. You surround yourselves with them. They're the wrong fucking books.
What are the right fucking books, Will?
Hey, whatever blows your hair back.
Yeah.
So this is good. Robin Williams is letting Matt Damon have some power. He's walking around, he's investigating the office. Instead of buying into the countertransference and going along with it by trying to puff up and say, hey, sit down, get away from my stuff, Robin Williams has enough differentiation, enough maturity, enough professionalism to just be like, okay, he can insult me. I have enough self-esteem to withstand that. Plus, I'm quite positive that he's doing this because Matt Damon has an issue with power and he feels powerless in this situation, and he needs to establish a little bit of power over me, and that's okay.
It's a real piece of shit. The sky's falling on your head, the waves are crashing over your little boat, the oars are about to snap. You're just pissing your pants, you're crying for the harbor, so maybe you do what you gotta do to get out. Maybe you became a psychologist.
Bingo. That's it. Let me do my job now. You start with me. Come on.
Maybe you married the wrong woman.
Maybe you should watch your mouth. Watch it right there, Chief, all right?
Robin Williams is allowing Matt Damon to have some power, which is fine. He's like, if you want to screw with me, you want to judge me, that's okay. I have enough self-esteem. But then there's a line. Every therapist has a line. And this is what I talk with my supervisees about. Being a good therapist is being able to withstand a certain amount of foul play from the clients that you have, particularly with those clients who are exhibiting this kind of behavior. The thing I always say is clients come to therapy because they have problems. People will encounter clients like this and they'll come to me and they'll be like, I have this client who's like insults me all the time and won't let me do any therapy. And he's commenting on my paintings and giving me a bunch of shit. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, why do clients come to therapy? And they'll be like, because they have problems. Sometimes those problems manifest in behaviors that actually interfere with therapy. It presents in a relational sense. When people have relational traumas like Will Hunting does here, then there's going to be transferences. And that's what the client is exhibiting. He's exhibiting transference to Robin Williams, an anger, a hostility, a power play. In all likelihood, his father had a power play with him. That's playing out. And so as a therapist, when that happens, you have to say, okay, people come to therapy because they have problems, and now I am seeing it, and it's directed towards me. The amount of negativity that you're getting from a client, it'll get under your skin a little bit, and that's why you need your support team. But in session, you have the strength to withstand it. But there's a certain line, and I always point that out to my supervisees. It's like there's a line that you should predetermine that you will not let clients cross.
Well, that's it, isn't it? You married the wrong woman. What happened? Why'd she leave you? Was she, banging some other guy?
If you ever disrespect my wife again, I will end you. I will fucking end you.
This is definitely crossing the line. I mean, you could lose your license so fast if you did something like this to a client.
Got that, Chief?
Time's up.
Yeah.
This is a good depiction of what we call the wounded healer concept, which is the recognition that all therapists, as healers, are wounded themselves. We all have traumas. The Robin Williams therapist has been through something really horrific. His wife has died, and he clearly is still grieving that, which makes total sense. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are showing us that this therapist has complicated feelings. He's a real human being, and he has his own issues. It's sort of implied, I suppose, that Robin Williams wants to work with Matt Damon because Robin Williams might want to use this therapy as a way of healing himself, that through healing, us as therapists can heal as well. It's totally normal. It happens all the time. I have healed tremendously from my past traumas through me taking care of other people. Some people would say, well, that's unethical, right? You, as a therapist, can't be using your clients in this way. It's not an ethical violation to have a secondary benefit to therapy that benefits yourself. Now, if you let that benefit override the treatment of the client, where you're exploiting a client or it diminishes the treatment of the client, then yes, that is considered an ethical violation. All you therapists listening out there, you know these experiences where you had a client who had something that was very similar to your past. And by taking care of them, you're taking care of the wounded therapist inside of you vicariously. And it's really a wonderful aspect of being a therapist.
You got a thing for swans? Is this like a fetish? It's something like maybe we need to devote some time to?
Thought about what you said to me the other day about my painting. Stayed up half the night thinking about it.
So this is a good technique that Robin Williams is using. It's a very humanistic approach, a very authentic approach. Look, I'm a real human being, and I'm not looking down at you. And what you said to me really affected me.
You know what occurred to me?
No.
You're just a kid. You don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about.
Why, thank you.
It's all right. You've never been out of Boston.
Okay, so that's kind of interesting. He is being hostile and insulting to his client. If this was a real therapy session, we would maybe ask Robin Williams, like, were you insulting your client with a purpose? Was there some kind of therapeutic intention there that why you're doing that? Or did you just feel like you wanted to get back at him? I would assume that the therapist is saying, you know what? If I'm going to get through this kid, I've got to be real. I've got to be authentic. And I've got to show him that I'm a real human being. And a part of that might be admitting to certain impulses that are very untherapist stereotype. One of those things might be like, insulting a client. You don't know shit. You're just a little kid. You don't know anything.
I bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel. You've never actually stood there and looked up at that beautiful ceiling. If I ask you about women, you'd probably give me a syllabus of your personal favorites.
I just want to point out the excellent acting that is happening in this movie.
When I ask you about love, you'd probably quote me a sonnet. But you've never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable. Known someone that could level you with her eyes. Feeling like God put an angel on earth just for you.
So this is a very moving intervention, very authentic, very real, and we'll see if it works on Matt Damon in this instance.
Do you think I'd know the first thing about how hard your life has been? How you feel? Who you are? Because I read Oliver Twist? Does that encapsulate you? I don't give a shit about all that, because you know what? I can't learn anything from you. I can't read in some fucking book. Unless you want to talk about you. Who you are. Then I'm fascinated.
This is great. It all builds up to the therapist saying, I want to learn about you, and I'm not going to assume things from books and impose them on you. I don't know the first thing about you. I couldn't possibly know what you've been through in your life. I'm fascinated. I'm so curious about who you are and what your experiences are. This is one of the magical things that really only therapy can provide. We could provide this sort of listening to our loved ones. We should. But therapy is just such a unique experience where a therapist is trained, hopefully they do this, where they really, really listen. Research shows that that kind of listening is curative. It lowers symptoms. It improves outcomes, and is often ignored in our quote-unquote evidence-based society right now. It's evidence-based to listen well. It's obvious to me as to why this really helps people. We are social creatures. We depend on each other. We need each other. And one of the critical, most fundamental aspects of that dependency that we have on each other is to be understood, to be really understood. It relaxes us. It has a physiological effect on us. It has a psychological effect on us that's beneficial. Robin Williams he's setting this all up, and then he ends with this: I want to know you. I've certainly had sessions like this where the client just refuses to say anything. As a therapist, you're forced to just stare at them or just, watch the clock as it ticks by. At the beginning of my career, I can think of 3 clients at the top of my head who would frequently do this sort of thing to me. And that's totally normal. We want to allow people the time that they need to feel safe in therapy.
I was on this plane once, and I'm sitting there, and captain gets on, he does this whole, we'll be cruising at 35,000 feet, but then he puts the mic down, he forgets to turn it off.
So all of Robin Williams' hard work up until this point has finally paid off. The client is finally just talking about his life. And as a therapist, I can tell you that is a wonderful feeling where you're just like, I became a therapist for moments like this where I do my job, I put up with all the crap, and finally the client opens up to me because I want to be a safe place. Not that I wanted to win the war, but because I want to provide a safe space.
My wife used to fart when she was nervous. She had all sorts of wonderful idiosyncrasies. She used to fart in her sleep.
I remember hearing somewhere that this particular part of the scene was improv, where Robin Williams tells a story about his farting wife while she slept, and that Matt Damon didn't know that Robin Williams was going to say this story, and that Matt Damon's reaction is genuine.
And you don't regret meeting your wife?
Why? Because the pain I feel now? Oh, I got regrets, Will, but I don't regret a single day I spent with her.
So right now, Robin Williams' therapist is what we call modeling. He's showing the client how to grieve, how to be real, how to accept the good with the bad, how to have self-compassion, how to recognize your own vulnerabilities. This is self-disclosure, but it's effective probably because the Matt Damon client is going like, I don't come from a place where men or anyone talks about their vulnerabilities like this. And the therapist is modeling how to be healthy, how to have a healthy approach and viewpoint about one's own emotional life and one's own attachments and one's regrets. And the therapist, I'm assuming, is hoping that Matt Damon client can see that and follow suit.
We got tickets.
You got tickets?
Yep. Day of the game. We're sitting in a bar waiting for the game to start.
I won't play this clip because they're playing Elliott Smith, and I don't want to get dinged on YouTube for some copyright thing. I love Elliott Smith. He's probably my favorite singer-songwriter.
So what do you really want to do?
I want to be a shepherd.
Really?
I want to move up to Nashua, get a nice little spread, get some sheep and tend to them.
Maybe you should go do that.
What?
If you're gonna jerk off, why don't you just do it at home with a moist towel?
You chucking me?
Yeah, get the fuck out.
No, time's not up yet.
Yeah, it
I'm
is.
not leaving, no.
Listen, you're not gonna answer my questions. You're wasting my fucking time.
What? I thought we were friends.
The therapist was asking the client, who are you and what do you want? Who are you really? And this is actually a very common thing in therapy that I do with clients. Who are you and how do you feel and what are you passionate about and what do you want? But this takes a lot of time for people. When people are not given the chance to explore who they are and what they want at the early stages of life, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, then it's really hard for them to do that later in life. A lot of people are walking around, they don't know what they want, they don't know how they feel. And that's because they were never really given a chance to explore that and a safe place to express that early in life. And they've cut themselves off from that part of themselves. Underneath those barriers is a self, is someone who has a lot of passion, is a connection with the direction in your life that you want to go in. But it takes a lot of time to get there. This therapist is moving kind of fast, and there's a certain section of humanistic therapy that does this, where they don't necessarily respect the psychodynamic and developmental aspects, and they really try to push people. And so if I watched this, I would say to the therapist, whoa, you were in a good track of therapy where you were asking the client to get in touch with themselves and, get in touch with their passion. And makes total sense. The client is getting resistant to that, feels it necessary to and be defiant back to the therapist, be sarcastic. I want to be a shepherd, that kind of thing. And then the therapist gets upset at that and says, get out of my office. And then we see the client kind of hurt by that. He's revealing some vulnerability, like, hey, I thought we were friends here. So if I saw this, I would be like, whoa, therapist, I think you're overreacting here. Give it some time. What's going on inside of you that's causing you to want to do this? Now, ultimately, this all works in the end. So maybe it was a good idea to do this, but it's not something I would recommend.
Playtime's over, okay?
Well, why are you kicking me out, Sean? You're lecturing me on life? Look at you, you fucking burnout. What winds your clock?
So now the client's really hurt. He pleaded with him as just like, hey, I thought we were friends. That didn't work. He's getting the cold shoulder from the therapist. Now he's really hurt. And now the secondary emotion of anger kicks in. It's just like, what about you? He's relying on that old aggression, which, isn't a good sign.
Where's your soulmate? You want to talk about soulmates? Where is she?
Dead.
That's right, she's fucking dead. She fucking dies, and you just cash in your chips and you walk away?
Hey, at least I played a hand.
Oh, and you played a hand and you lost. You lost a big fucking hand, and some people lose a big hand like that and have the sack to ante up again.
Look at me. What do you want to do? But I ask you a very simple question, and you can't give me a straight answer. Fuck you. You're the shepherd.
Now, the therapist, I'm guessing he's like, I'm doing this for a reason, but I wouldn't do this if I was him.
My father was an alcoholic. Mean fucking drunk. Come home hammered, looking to wail on somebody. So I'd provoke him so he wouldn't go after my mother and little brother.
Yeah, he used to just put a wrench, a stick, and a belt on the table and just say choose.
Well, I gotta go with the belt there, Vanna.
I used to go with the wrench.
So I'm pretty sure this is leading up to the climax of the movie, the scene that I often will refer to when I'm trying to inspire my trainees to really break through to their clients and really understand their clients. I know in the past I've cried during this scene. We'll see if I cry on camera this time.
You wanna talk about it?
No.
You will? I don't know a lot. You see this? All this shit. This is not your fault. Look at me, son. It's not your fault.
I know.
So I often use this as an example of what I call using your instrument. I think actors use that phrase to say that you have to use your entire soul, body, spirit to get across to clients. You can't just say, hey, it's not your fault, and expect that it's really going to get underneath people's skin in the way that you really need it to in order for it to be therapeutic. So Robin Williams starts off by saying, it's not your fault, the abuse that you went through growing up. And the client's like, yeah, I know. So it's all intellectual at this point. It's not really getting to the healing place, right? And Robin Williams kind of squares up, lots of eye contact, and says, hey, it's not your fault. And the client says, yeah, I know, you're right. Again, we're still intellectualizing this. A lot of therapy can be in this zone where it's very intellectual and not necessarily where it needs to be, which is in a healing experiential place. And this is where humanistic therapy really informs us about how to do that. The here and now, the immediacy, the realness, the authenticity, the humanness of our emotions and our experiences. Let's get to that experience. The way that I might phrase it is that through a secure attachment experience, we are healed from our attachment injuries and are better able to regulate our emotions, better able to trust other people, better able to trust and love ourselves through this experience of a therapist, a secure attachment, really taking care of a client. And so he's just like, hey, it's not your fault. And the therapist doesn't give up. This is another thing I tell a lot of trainees is you probably have a lot of great ideas. And when you implement them, it doesn't really work. And what I tell people is it's very common for a great idea not to work the first time. And so you got to keep at it. In this example, the therapist is like, I had a great thing to say. Hey, it's not your fault. It didn't really get through the first time. So he doubles down. Hey, it's not your fault. It's still not getting through. Well, that doesn't mean you give up. Doesn't mean you just turn away, well, it didn't work. It means you got to be persistent. You got to show that you really care. You got to show that you're not just there to talk intellectually about something, that you're really there to listen and that you're really feeling the full weight of what this experience is for this client, that he was abused and he's never really cried about it. He's never really confided in anyone about the traumas that he's been through. He's never felt safe enough to really allow himself to feel those feelings that are all pent up and to have that healing experience.
It's not your fault.
I know.
No, you don't. It's not your fault.
I know.
It's not your fault.
All right.
First 2 times, it's intellectual. Then the next 3 times, the client's like, okay, what are you doing? Like, I get it. Why are you repeating yourself? Because we're getting a little deeper. And the client's like, whoa, we're getting too close to my emotions right now. Like, back off, pal. Eye contact, get closer. Let's be real here. It's not your fault.
It's not your fault. Don't fuck with me. It's not your fault.
Don't fuck with me, all right? Don't fuck with me, Sean, not you.
If I really let loose, I would start crying right now. I've been in sessions like this before. Not exactly like this, of course, but it's such a human experience. It's such a meaningful thing. This is why I became a therapist. This is why I'm a human being. I don't just do this in therapy. I want to have these experiences all the time in life. When I have Bob on the podcast, sometimes we have experiences like this while we're recording the podcast. So we've entered phase 3 of the confrontation and the intervention, where the client is now starting to actually go there, starting to actually let out those feelings. He is saying, don't do this. You're betraying me. And Robin Williams takes a chance and says, no, I'm going to push past this. I care. And I'm going to continue to say, hey, it's not your fault. For those of you out there who can relate to this, you'll know what I'm talking about. But for those who don't, when you've been made to feel worthless, when you've been made to feel not good enough, when you've been criticized to the very core of who you are, of course, intellectually, we know that we're good enough. Of course, intellectually, we know it's not our fault. But deep down, which is the majority of our psyche, the majority of our soul, does not believe it. There are certain ideas that we conclude early in life, given the way that we're treated, like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worth it, it is my fault. And we might intellectually know that it wasn't really our fault, but most of us still believes in this core sense that, yes, it was our fault. We did deserve those things to happen. It's a natural conclusion that children will come to as they try to make sense of why things like this are happening to them. This conclusion can even happen for kids that aren't necessarily even being abused. A child grows up in a family where they feel like they're not the favorite child. And it's not abuse, but it's not great parenting. And the child concludes, oh, there must be something wrong with me. Or maybe I was adopted. Maybe that's why everyone is treating me this way, because I'm not actually in this family, because I don't feel like I'm in this family. Children will come to those conclusions. It's almost universal that children do, because again, they're trying to make sense of the world. They're like, well, why would I be treated so badly? Well, it must be because I'm a bad person. And until we get to that core and really start to feel it and have contact with it and let it out and get healing around that, and for a therapist to really get in contact with that material, until we get there, it's hard for us to heal, and a lot of our symptoms are going to persist. Anxiety, depression, complex PTSD symptoms, attachment issues, attachment insecurity behaviors. The relief of those symptoms depend on getting in contact with that. And sometimes it requires a therapist who's really willing to take the chance, like Robin Williams is doing in this scenario. I just love this scene. It's just such an inspiring scene, really, for therapists.
Not your fault. It's not your fault.
And I'm getting a little teary watching this. It's just an incredible moment of film, really. There's so many bad depictions of therapy in movies and TV shows. And to have this to actually hold on to as a therapist is really great. I applaud everyone who was involved in creating this one scene. Matt Damon, Ben Affleck for writing the script, Matt Damon for giving just such a powerful performance here. I mean, it just feels like a real cry that he's giving. Robin Williams, Gus Van Sant, everyone involved. It's so inspirational to see an actual depiction of therapy when it's going well and in a very humanistic way. It's just amazing. It's again, inspirational. I have thought about moments like this to inspire me, to galvanize my efforts in therapy, to remind me that moments like this can happen and do happen, and to see you through the difficult times. Being a therapist is a very difficult job, and you need to be inspired to persevere, and you need an ideal to head towards and to believe in humans, to believe in our clients. And I just really love this scene.
I'm so sorry.
All right, well, that does it for me reacting to Good Will Hunting. And for you therapists out there, I hope that this movie inspires you the way that it inspires me. And for you non-therapists out there, and for you therapists, incidentally, as well, I hope this inspires you, if you haven't already, to find a therapist who does this kind of work with you. Not exactly like this, someone who strangles you, for example, but someone who really listens and spends the time and the effort to really help you heal from your experiences. Now, I will say, as a critique of this movie kind of implies that one session where Matt Damon breaks down was enough therapy for him to recover from his attachment injuries. That is almost universally, if not universally, not the case. The Matt Damon character has many, many more years of therapy ahead of him in all likelihood. Not that they didn't say that didn't happen, but that's definitely my experience. And humanistic therapies sometimes make that mistake, in my opinion, by assuming that one cathartic moment, one spontaneous expression of one's emotions will absolutely cause long-lasting change in someone. And certainly that can happen, and there are accounts of that for sure. But in my experience, what we need to do is we have to have moments like that many, many times, because through those experiences, the neurons of the brain and the soul and the psyche and the personality of the client begins to learn through experience that their emotions are okay, that they are good enough, that it actually wasn't their fault, that someone actually really, really believes in them and really, really cares about them. Through that repetitive relational experience, people get better on a lot of fronts. Everyone out there, you deserve a therapist like Robin Williams, aside from strangling you. You all deserve that. Even you therapists out there, I know you're in therapy as well, at least you should be. Also, everyone out there, please take care of yourself. Take care of other people, particularly during these difficult times, because we all deserve it. We really, really, really do.